The room erupted in polite laughter. The Arab millionaire leaned back in his leather chair, smirking at the young man standing before him. His suit wasn't designer, his shoes weren't polished, and everyone in the room already knew who he was, the son of a cleaning lady. "Tell me, boy," the millionaire said with arrogance dripping from his voice. "What makes you think you belong in a place like this?" The young man didn't flinch. His gaze was calm, steady, and almost mysterious. Then with a quiet confidence, he replied, "I speak 9 languages." The laughter grew louder this time. Glasses clinked, a few guests shook their heads, and the millionaire laughed the loudest of them all. To him, this was nothing more than a poor boy trying to impress the rich with a tall tale. But what no one in that room realized was that the young man was about to turn the tables in a way none of them could ever forget. Within minutes, the mockery would turn into silence. The same people who sneered at his background would sit frozen. Jaws dropped as the cleaning lady's son revealed a truth so powerful it would not only humble the arrogant millionaire, but also force the entire room to question everything they thought they knew about dignity, education, and worth. Because sometimes the richest man in the room is not the one with money, but the one with knowledge. The banquet hall shimmered with crystal chandeliers and golden decor, but not everyone inside belonged to that world of wealth. At the far corner of the grand estate, just beyond the velvet ropes that separated guests from staff, a woman in a faded uniform quietly scrubbed the marble floor. Her hands were worn, her back bent from years of labor, but her eyes carried a quiet dignity. She was the cleaning lady, hired help invisible to most. Her name was Clara. For more than a decade, she had worked for the same Arab family that owned half the hotels in the region. Every morning she rose before the sun, packed a small bag of bread and tea, and took 2 buses to reach the glittering gates of the mansion. She scrubbed bathrooms no one thanked her for cleaning, dusted portraits of people who never even learned her name, and yet she carried herself with silent pride. Because for Clara, this was more than a job. It was survival. At home, things were different. In a tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city, Clara was not a servant. She was a mother. Her son Daniel was her everything. She raised him with the belief that dignity was not measured by wealth or titles, but by character, knowledge, and respect. Daniel was unlike the other kids in their neighborhood. While many wasted evenings on the streets, Daniel buried himself in books. He'd sit by the dim light of a second-hand lamp, flipping through pages of old dictionaries, borrowed storybooks, and any material he could find. He had a gift, an ear for languages. It began when Clara brought home an old French phrase book discarded from the mansion's library. Daniel devoured it, memorizing words until he could string entire sentences together. When Clara saw her son muttering French phrases while washing dishes, her tired eyes filled with tears. Soon it wasn't just French. Daniel began picking up Spanish from a neighbor, Arabic from listening closely to his mother's employers, Mandarin from online videos, and even Russian from an elderly shopkeeper who enjoyed teaching him basic greetings. The boy was a sponge, absorbing every sound, every accent, every nuance. By the time he was a teenager, he could converse in more languages than most diplomats. But Daniel didn't brag. He never had the chance. Who would believe the son of a cleaning lady could be a linguistic prodigy? Clara protected his secret like a treasure. She often reminded him, knowledge is power, but power should be revealed only when it matters most. And so Daniel waited. He watched. He studied. When he turned 21, Clara encouraged him to apply for internships and positions, but everywhere he went, doors slammed shut. He didn't have the right connections, the right name, or the polished accent of the elite. Employers dismissed him the moment they learned who his mother was. The discrimination stung, but it didn't break him. Instead, it fueled his determination. He believed that one day his abilities would speak louder than prejudice. That day arrived when Clara was assigned to help during a grand reception at the mansion. The Arab millionaire, proud and flamboyant, was entertaining foreign investors from around the globe. Diplomats, bankers, and tycoons filled the hall. Clara, as always, worked silently in the background until one guest pointed at her son. Daniel had accompanied his mother that day simply to help her carry supplies, but his presence caught the eye of the millionaire. Perhaps it was his sharp gaze or the way he carried himself despite his modest clothes. Amused, the millionaire called him over, intending to mock. "So," the man asked in front of everyone, "what do you do? Carry mops like your mother?" The room chuckled. Daniel didn't answer right away. His mother froze, her heart sinking, knowing too well how this game worked. But Daniel straightened his shoulders. Calmly, he replied, I do more than carry mops. I speak 9 languages. The laughter that followed shook the walls. The millionaire smirked, convinced this poor boy was bluffing. What he didn't know was that Daniel was about to prove him wrong in the most unforgettable way. The millionaire leaned back in his gilded chair, his jeweled cufflinks catching the chandelier light. His lips curled into a grin that wasn't friendly, it was cruel amusement. 9 languages? He scoffed, his voice dripping with disbelief. Boy, I have executives who barely manage one. Do you expect us to believe such nonsense? The room chuckled. A few guests exchanged smirks, whispering behind their champagne glasses. To them, Daniel was nothing more than entertainment, a poor boy who had dared to step out of his place. Clara's heart raced as she stood at the edge of the room. Clutching her cleaning cloth like a lifeline, she knew what was coming. She had seen this look before, the mockery, the humiliation, the laughter at her expense. Now it was directed at her son. But Daniel didn't flinch. His eyes moved across the room, scanning the faces, noticing the array of nationalities. And then, without warning, he began to speak. First, he turned to a French diplomat sitting stiffly near the front. In flawless French, he greeted him warmly. Bonsoir, monsieur. Je connais vos travaux et je suis honoré de vous rencontrer. Good evening, sir. I know of your work and I am honored to meet you. The diplomat froze, his glass halfway to his lips. Slowly, his brows rose. Incroyable, he whispered, astonished. The room shifted, murmurs replacing laughter. Before anyone could recover, Daniel turned sharply toward a Spanish banker. With the ease of a native speaker, he said, Su país ha hecho un trabajo increíble en el mercado financiero global. Admiro mucho su dedicación. Your country has done an incredible job in the global financial market. I deeply admire your dedication. The banker's eyes widened and he leaned forward, impressed. ¿Cómo aprendiste eso? The laughter in the room faltered. A hush began to fall. But Daniel wasn't done. He pivoted toward the Arab investors, his voice flowing in perfect classical Arabic. أشكركم على الترحيب بي في بيتكم. اللغة هي جسر بين القلوب، وأنا سعيد أنني أستطيع أن أعبر هذا الجسر معكم. Thank you for welcoming me into your home. Language is a bridge between hearts, and I am glad I can cross that bridge with you. The millionaire's smile vanished. His guests began to murmur in amazement, nodding in respect. And yet the millionaire wasn't ready to surrender. He waved his hand dismissively, trying to regain control. Parlor tricks, he barked. Anyone can memorize a few sentences from a book. Show us something real, boy. Daniel's eyes flashed. This was the moment his mother had prepared him for. When knowledge must rise above mockery. Without hesitation, he shifted into Mandarin, addressing a Chinese businesswoman seated near the back. 语言不是技巧，而是灵魂的交流。能够与你交谈，对我来说是一种荣幸。Language is not a trick. It's the communication of souls. It's an honor to speak with you. The woman gasped, her hands clasping together. Perfect. Your tones are perfect, she exclaimed. By now, the room was silent. No more laughter, no more smirks, only wide eyes and stunned expressions. Daniel looked around once more and added Russian, Italian, Portuguese, and even Swahili to the cascade of languages, each sentence more flawless than the last. Every word carried not just accuracy, but warmth and respect, as though he had lived in each culture. The guests were entranced. Their arrogance melted into awe. What they had dismissed as impossible was unfolding right before their eyes. But the millionaire, the man who had sparked it all, sat frozen in his chair, his smugness replaced by shock. His jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the armrest as if refusing to admit defeat. Finally, he spat out, So what if you speak 9 languages? You're still just the son of a cleaning lady. That will never change. The insult cut through the air like a blade. Clara's eyes filled with tears, her heart aching at the cruelty. But Daniel stood taller than ever. His voice, calm and unwavering, echoed through the hall. My mother may clean your floors, but she also raised me to rise higher than your walls. Her dignity gave me strength. Her sacrifice gave me knowledge. And today you see that the son of a cleaning lady can speak to the world, while you can barely speak with respect. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time that night, the millionaire had no clever reply. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. They were leaning forward, waiting, because everyone knew the tide had shifted. The stage was set for justice to strike back. The air in the hall was thick with tension. Guests who had come to sip champagne and exchange business cards now found themselves leaning forward, unable to look away from the young man standing in the center of it all. The millionaire's face flushed crimson, not from wine, but from humiliation. He had tried to reduce Daniel to nothing more than the son of a cleaning lady, but the boy's eloquence and composure made him look small, petty, and powerless in front of his own guests. One of the diplomats finally broke the silence. In French, he said loudly, "Ce jeune homme mérite plus de respect que beaucoup ici." This young man deserves more respect than many here. The words struck like thunder. Other guests nodded, murmuring in agreement. Some even clapped softly. The millionaire shifted uncomfortably. His empire thrived on power and reputation, yet tonight, his pride was crumbling before his very eyes. He had invited people to admire his wealth, but they were now admiring a poor boy's mind instead. Daniel did not gloat. He did not raise his voice. Instead, he walked slowly to the center of the hall, his mother watching in disbelief. "You asked what makes me think I belong in a place like this," Daniel said firmly, his gaze fixed on the millionaire. "I'll tell you. Belonging doesn't come from money. It doesn't come from titles. It comes from value, and tonight, I've shown that I bring value no amount of gold can buy." Gasps echoed. Heads turned toward Clara, who stood trembling near the wall. For the first time in years, eyes that once overlooked her now acknowledged her, not as a servant, but as the woman who had raised someone extraordinary. Daniel continued, his voice gaining strength. "Every word I speak is a reflection of my mother's sacrifice. She scrubbed your floor so I could read books. She endured humiliation so I could rise above it. You laugh at her uniform, but I honor it because without her, I would not stand here speaking the languages of nations you struggle to negotiate with." A wave of applause erupted. What began as polite claps grew into a roar of support. Even those who had mocked him minutes earlier now stood, clapping in respect. The sound shook the golden chandeliers, echoing through the mansion like a verdict. The millionaire's fists clenched on the armrest. For years, he had believed money was the only language of power, but tonight his wealth couldn't silence knowledge. His arrogance couldn't overshadow truth. Desperate to regain control, he rose from his chair. "Enough!" he barked. "You think words make you powerful? Words don't run empires. Money does." But before his outburst could sour the moment, Daniel turned to him with calm defiance. "Money builds walls," he said, "but language builds bridges. And tonight every person here knows which one truly matters." The guests erupted again, this time with cheers. The millionaire's authority collapsed, under the weight of the crowd's approval. He could no longer laugh, no longer mock, no longer reduce Daniel to a servant's son. Then something remarkable happened. The Chinese businesswoman rose to her feet and addressed Daniel directly. "If your skills are real, I would like to speak with you about representing our company in negotiations. We need people who understand cultures, not just contracts." The Spanish banker nodded eagerly. "And my firm could use someone like him. 9 languages? That is a treasure, not a trick." Offers began pouring in from around the room. Men and women who moments ago had looked at Daniel as a curiosity now saw him as an asset. They extended hands, exchanged cards, and even asked him to translate on the spot, impressed by his fluidity. Clara stood frozen, her hands trembling as tears streamed down her cheeks. For years she had been invisible in this house. For years she had swallowed insults and bent, her back under the weight of other people's arrogance. But now, because of her son, the same halls that echoed with mockery were ringing with applause. The millionaire was cornered. His pride had been shattered. His guests no longer looking to him, but to the very boy he had tried to humiliate. For the first time in his life, he realized money could not buy back respect once it was lost. Daniel turned one final time to face him. His voice was steady, his words clear. "You wanted to make me feel small. But tonight, the only smallness in this room is arrogance, and the world has just witnessed it." The millionaire lowered his gaze. He had no answer. The son of a cleaning lady had done the impossible. He had silenced a man whose voice once commanded empires. The climax was complete. The power had shifted. The mansion's grand hall, once filled with arrogance and laughter at another's expense, now thundered with applause. People who had arrived to admire the Arab millionaire's wealth were instead standing in admiration of a young man who carried no riches in his pockets but an immeasurable treasure in his mind. Daniel stood tall in the center, but his eyes immediately turned toward the corner of the room, where his mother still stood frozen. Clara clutched her worn cleaning cloth to her chest, her lips trembling, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. Slowly, Daniel extended his hand toward her. "Mama," he said softly, his voice carrying across the hall. "Come here." The room fell silent again as every head turned toward the humble woman in her faded uniform. Clara hesitated, her hands shaking, unsure if she had the right to step into the spotlight, but Daniel's steady gaze gave her strength. With small steps, she walked across the polished marble floor that she had spent years scrubbing on her knees. When she reached him, Daniel didn't hesitate. He took the cloth from her hand and set it aside, then lifted her hand high into the air like a champion's. "This is the woman who gave me everything," Daniel declared. "You see me speaking 9 languages, but what you don't see is the sacrifice that made it possible. She cleaned your floors so I could read books. She went hungry so I could eat. She endured humiliation so I could stand tall. Tonight, if you see greatness in me, it is because of her." The hall erupted into thunderous applause once again. Some guests even rose to their feet, clapping harder than before. Others wiped tears from their eyes, moved by the raw truth of his words. Clara broke down completely, sobbing as she embraced her son. For years she had been treated as less than human, but tonight the same walls that had witnessed her silent suffering now echoed with honor for her dignity. One of the French diplomats approached her directly. "Madame," he said respectfully, bowing slightly, "you should be proud. Your son is a gift to this world, and so are you for raising him." The Chinese businesswoman added, "Great leaders aren't born from wealth. They are shaped by mothers like you." For Clara, those words meant more than all the riches in the mansion. Meanwhile, the Arab millionaire sat slumped in his chair, the weight of humiliation pressing down harder than any fortune he had ever carried. His guests no longer looked to him for guidance. His empire of pride had been reduced to rubble by the son of a woman he had never valued. Daniel, however, didn't seek revenge. He turned to the millionaire and, with a quiet dignity, spoke his final words. "You tried to measure me by my mother's uniform, but you forgot that uniforms can fade, while knowledge never does. Respect once lost cannot be bought back with gold. Tonight, I hope you learn that true wealth is not what you own, it's what you know, and how you treat those around you." The words landed like a final strike, yet they carried no malice. They were not meant to destroy, but to teach. The millionaire lowered his gaze, unable to meet Daniel's eyes. For the first time in his life, he was speechless, not because of intimidation, but because the truth had left no room for excuses. As the evening drew to a close, Daniel walked out of the hall with his mother at his side. Not as the son of a cleaning lady mocked for his status, but as a man whose worth had been proven to all. Clara no longer walked in the shadows. She walked beside her son, her head held high. Outside, the night air was cool, the stars glittering above them. Clara looked at Daniel, still in disbelief. "I never imagined this day would come," she whispered. Daniel smiled gently. "You gave me the tools, Mama. You gave me everything." Tonight, the world finally saw it. They walked into the night, not rich in gold, but richer than anyone inside that mansion could ever be. For dignity had been restored, respect had been earned, and the lesson left behind would echo forever. Never judge a person by their clothes, their job, or their background, for true wealth lives in knowledge, character, and heart. And on that night, the world learned to never underestimate the son of a cleaning lady. What would you do if people laughed at you for who your parents are? Would you stay silent, or would you rise and show them your true worth?